Hi there, I'm Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. So today I'm in Paris, France, and this is what we're painting, the Eiffel Tower. And I'm going to be sipping a little bit of Merlot. So let's get painting and let's get sipping. Okay, so the materials I'm going to be using today is a stretched and primed 16 by 20 canvas. You can get this at any of your local craft stores, or you can get it online, and you can certainly switch up the size. Ooh, I'm going to be doing it this way today. Sorry about that. But again, you can switch up the size if you want. I'm going to be using 3 brushes. I'm using a 1-inch wide bristle brush. I'm using a number 4, this is a flat bristle brush also, and then I'm using a number 6 round synthetic brush. I'll also be using a pencil for a couple of times when I need to sketch. This is just a basic number 2 pencil. You're going to need a paper towel for drying your brushes after you wash them in your cup full of water. And then I'm using acrylic paint today. The colors that I'm using are titanium white, cobalt blue, this is a green oxide, chrome yellow, raw umber, burnt sienna, and Mars black. And of course you can switch up the colors if you'd like, but these are the ones that I'm using today. And that's all you're going to need for your materials. Alright, so the first step that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be painting the sky. I'm going to be using primarily blue and white, but you could certainly change it up and maybe use a little black or a little brown just to give more natural tones to it. I'm using my large bristle brush for this process. I'm going to start with white and blue on my brush at the same time. I'm going to be using mostly a left to right brush stroke. I like to start up at the top and on the edge of my canvas. That gives me a good indication as to what color combination I have on my brush at that moment. And as I go, I'm going to be emulating what I see in the sky a little bit, but I'll probably be less detailed on my clouds, as my main focal point here is going to be the Eiffel Tower. So I'm not going to be using a whole lot of detail in my sky, as I want the Eiffel Tower to shine on her beautiful own. So right now I'm just using a little bit of blue and white. I'm doing a left to right motion. By not pre-mixing the paint on my palette, I can have these varying shades of blue and white. You can do little circular fashion if you want to get more indication of clouds going by, as opposed to just a smooth sky. And there is some light clouds flowing by. I am going to touch my brush in black and in my raw umber, just so I can get a little bit of natural tone going into some of these clouds. And then I'm going to be using some white. As this dries, I will be kind of manipulating these clouds a little bit, but right now I'm just getting more of my sky on here. As I come down here, I'm going to be using some more of that blue and white. I like my sky to get lighter and a more natural tone as it's coming down my canvas. So as I go along, I will be lightening up that sky as it comes down. And I'll probably be using a little bit of that raw umber as well, so that way the sky will get a real natural color. I'm coming really low down on my canvas to keep perspective as to the size of this Eiffel Tower. I am going to need a little bit more white paint, so if maybe my assistant could get me a little more white paint, that'd be fantastic. And I'm just kind of going through here. As these colors up top are drying, that's allowing me to move them around and just get them a little bit more into a shape. I think it's going to be, we're going to pause, not really pause here for a second, but this is the wonderful thing of kind of, you get a one-shot deal here. So let me just get myself some white paint here. I probably should have told him where it was before I asked him to get me some. But again, I'm kind of manipulating these clouds as I go, because I don't want to go too into detail. The Eiffel Tower is going to be my star of the show. So as I come down here, I'm really just adding some natural tones into the sky. And as I get down towards the bottom of the sky, I'm going to be using more of the raw umber color. But I still want to keep it really light because I'm seeing that the sky is very light as it goes down towards that horizon. So right now I'm going into white with just a touch of that raw umber to get this to be a real natural tone down at the bottom. And I'm just continuing to manipulate and move this paint around as it's drying, and it's giving me a nice natural look to that sky. You could come back on a second pass and put more definition into these clouds, and I might actually add a couple of brighter spots into them before I go on to my next step. But right now I'm just kind of getting this a nice basic tone onto this sky. I started with blue and white. I went in and I added a little bit of black to give some depth to some of the clouds in through there. And right now I'm just adding white to my brush to kind of work off some of the other colors that I might not want. Plus I want it nice and light down at the bottom. Before I call it on the sky, I am gonna go back into my white and maybe lighten up the top of a couple of these clouds. And this just adds a little bit of definition into them to break them up and make them look a little bit more resembling what I'm seeing in front of me. And then we are going to use this larger brush for the next step. So after you're all done with getting your sky as beautiful as you want it, you're going to take this big brush and just wash it and dry it and get ready for the next step. All right, so for the next step, what I'm doing is I'm laying in the ground or the pathway that we have over on the bottom right, which is going to be set underneath these trees that I've got. So I'm using my 1-inch wide bristle brush. I'm going to be using white and my 2 browns. So I have a raw umber and a burnt sienna. I'm going to be using, whoops, there goes my paper towel. I'm going to be using mostly white. But the way I'm going to start it is with all 3 colors on my brush at the same time. And I've got to lay down where I want this pathway to go. So I've already decided I'm going to have the Eiffel Tower starting over here. It's going to be on the left side of my canvas. So I've got my pathway going to be coming at me, which means it's got to get wider or down to the left on towards the bottom. I've got a big area at the bottom of my canvas for this groundwork. So really I've got brown and white on my brush right now. I'm going to add a little bit more white. And as I'm doing this, I'm noticing that I wanted to have some brighter tones from that sun. So I'm going to add some white and yellow onto my brush. And I can certainly tone this down if I want to, but what I'm seeing out there, I really want to have those brighter tones in it. And I'm not really using any particular brush stroke at this point. As soon as I get the groundwork on here, I can add any little details I want, but I really am just going for a base coat or blocking in the color of the ground right now. And then after I get my trees into place and my bushes into place and my grass into place, that's when I will add any additional color or definition that I want. There is a little pathway that's going to the left that I would like to kind of incorporate here. So I'm going to use my same color combination about a third of the way from here to here. And I'm really just going to add a line in through here. I do want it to make it look like it belongs with the same color scheme. So just kind of adding that in there. I'm going to be adding grass around it, but this is just the start of it. So once you get this step done, you're going to utilize this same brush for the next step, so you'll have to wash it and dry it. So you can get ready for the next step by just washing and drying that bristle brush, and I'll see you in a minute. All right, so for the next step, what I'm doing is I'm going to be painting in the grass that's going to be in this nice park area in the center. I'm going to be using green, yellow, brown. I might use a little my burnt sienna and white. And I'm going to be applying it in almost like a dotting fashion. So I know that I just want it to come in through here. I want it to look pretty natural. That's why I'm using these colors at the same time. So I'm just kind of dotting it in through here. I want to have some light spots and some dark spots. So as I go through this, you can certainly pick up your colors in a different color combination. Don't worry about your pathway, just go right to it. And what we'll do is after we get the color on here, we'll kind of button up the edges of it. We are going to have some hedges going on top of this, so it does not have to be perfect. I'm going to do this other section of grass in through here. And again, I put those colors on my brush, and now I'm just kind of dotting it to fill it in. Yellow, green, white is going to brighten this up a little bit. I'm going to have hedges on top of this, so again, it doesn't need to be 100% covered in, but you do definitely want it to be a natural color. So that's why I don't just go for the green. I will definitely add yellows and browns to it to make it emulate what I'm seeing in front of me. And I do see that at the edge there, to make it keep the authenticity of it, it's got a little bit of a dip down in through here. So I'm just going to kind of incorporate that so it keeps the authenticity of it. And after I put the hedges in there, I can certainly modify and tweak any little edges I might have to do or want to do. But that's going to conclude that step. For the next step, we're going to be utilizing our number 6 round brush. So you can put your big brush away in your water cup and get this brush ready for the next step. Okay, so for the next step, what I'm doing is I'm kind of doing a really loose interpretation of the city that you can see underneath the Eiffel Tower. So I'm going to be using my number 6 brush. I'll be using white and a combination of my browns, my yellow, and my black. Really what I'm doing is I'm just setting the stage and making sure I keep the authenticity of this. So I'm using white paint and brown, the raw umber, just to start this off. I've decided that my Eiffel Tower, the bottom of it is going to go about to here. So I want this city to come in somewhere in through here. I know that my legs of my Eiffel Tower are going to come right around here. So I don't really need to make this super fancy, but I definitely want to keep some sense of the accurate shape going on in through here. And then I've got a little bit going on over here. And I'm not doing anything super fancy here, just kind of this is a little bit of black on my brush. I know that there's some roof lines going on in through here. And now I'm just going to add some white paint to my brush. I'm doing this in just like a light grayish cream color, similar to what I see in front of me. You can bring this all the way to the edge because I do know that those buildings are going to go out to the edge. But again, I don't need to bring it to a really photorealistic state because this is definitely a beginner level painting. And make sure that you refer to the image that you've got down below. You can print this image and use it as a reference as you're following along with me. But again, I'm just doing a really loose interpretation of these buildings back here with a little bit of a cream/gray kind of color. I'll put a couple of little windows. I know the legs of my Eiffel Tower are going to come in through here. I'll do maybe a couple of little windows. I know that this has a rooftop in through here. There's, and again, I'm just kind of free-forming this and making a nice loose interpretation. I've got a couple of windows that go through here. And you don't need to make it fancy because once you put that Eiffel Tower in front of it, that's going to be the star of the show. It looks like there's a couple little trees up here, so I just dotted my brush with some green and brown. And that's about all I'm going to do for this building back here because I know the rest of it's going to be covered with trees. So what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to get your pencil out and we're going to make that sketch of the Eiffel Tower. So when you're all set with this, you can put this round brush away in your water cup and get out your pencil and get ready for the next step. All right, so what I'm doing for the next step is I'm going to do a basic sketch of the tower itself. I'm using my pencil. I know that the best thing to do here is to keep everything in relationship or ratio to what the object is next to it. So I'm going to start with that arc at the bottom right over the city, and then I'm going to build the entire structure from that. So I know that I've already kind of planned out where I want the legs to start, and I'm going on the inside of the legs. I know that the bottom of the legs are going to be hidden by the shrubs, so I'm not terribly concerned about their perfectness. I'm going to start the bottom portions, or where it starts the arc, somewhere in here. And I'm going to, you know that this has to be symmetrical and balanced. So whatever I do here on the left-hand side, I got to make sure that I make that very similar on the right-hand side, especially since we're kind of looking at this dead on. So you could sit here and you could, measure and make sure that you have it exactly as you want it, or you could eyeball it and try and fix it later. Whatever your personality warrants, that's the best way to do it. And then I just want to make sure this is pretty straight here, and you have erasers for a reason, so if you need to make any little corrections. And then once I've done that, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to eyeball kind of the center on my sketch, and I'm going to go up and mark a couple of main areas. So my next area is that first platform, so I'm going to do that, and I'm just kind of visually seeing where it is based on the ground level and based on how much room I have on my canvas. So I'm going to go up maybe about an inch and a half, mark that, and then I am using my fingers as a tool here to measure the next area up is going to be less of a distance than this. So I'm going to do my next level somewhere about here, and I'm going to try and keep this pretty darn straight, and I'm just kind of going by what I'm seeing here, and it's going to go a little bit higher, and I want to mark my top of my canvas. And if you want to make sure you're not going to tip, what you can do is you can make yourself a mark in what you believe to be the halfway point of your arc. You can take your pencil or any other tool and measure it, and then you come straight up to your top and make sure you are equal. Right now I'm off to the right, so I have to recenter that over to here. So that's an easy way to determine if you've got it centered. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to do a couple of straight lines off to the left and the right where my levels are. I know that I want to, I'm keeping it in relation to whatever that city is down below, or whatever you've used as your visual markers. And then I know that I've got to make some legs on here. I can't see the bottom portion to the legs, so I'm going to kind of freeform this here. And then I know my next level up is where I start to, I can have a straight line. So if I do this, I can in essence do a straight line right from the top down to this level here. So I'm just making my straight line. And now I can connect. There's a little tower up at the top. And I can connect this, I can just follow this down and connect it to these bottom two legs. And I'm just watching to see when it starts to bow out a little bit. And then I've got to mimic it over on the other side. And then I've got to look back and make sure that I've got it right, or close enough. And you can make your little adjustments as you see fit, but this is just going to be your pencil basic sketch for it. And then once you have this sketch done, we're going to switch brushes back to that small, the round brush, the number 6 round brush. Okay, so what I'm doing for the next step is I'm going to be painting the Eiffel Tower. I'm using my number 6 brush, and the reason I'm doing this is because it's just a basic introductory level painting. I'm not going for 100% of the detail, but I do want to have some nice clean lines. So what I'm going to do, one of my tips is, if you want to have a nice fluid line, is you can water down your paint a little bit. So I've watered down my paint a little bit. I'm going to be Another tip is I spin my brush on the side of my palette in my paint. That will repoint my brush. I'm going to be using brown, black, and white. So I'm going to actually just put them all in a little compartment on my tray so I have easy access to them. And you can, if you were to see the real color of the tower, it's super cool. It's got some gray tones and some brown tones in it. So I'm just going to use a mixture of these three colors. I do want it to be kind of on the darker side. I've got my initial sketch, so that's where I'm starting. And I'm going to just make sure that I'm looking dead on to it so that way I don't go crooked here. And I don't press hard on my canvas. That allows me to have these more slender lines. And if you find that your brush is skipping or you're not getting a nice smooth line, you can just add more water to your mixture. You can always go back and do a second layer, but this first layer is the one that if you can get it nice and clean, just, that makes your job easier. So again, I'm just kind of going over that initial sketch, and then I will be adding my details after that. This is, like I said, a nice entry-level kind of painting, so you don't have to worry about it being super perfect. I will be having a whole bunch of trees and shrubs that are going to kind of line the side of it. So again, that's something that will help to disguise any non-perfect little spots that you may have. Another trick that I have to keeping my hand steady is I rest my hand on my canvas. That allows me to have a systematic pressure that I'm applying to the canvas, and it controls me from going too thick or too thin, and it also keeps my hand steady. So that's a good tip for making sure that you have it nice and steady to follow your initial sketch that you did. And I'm going to do this left side, so hopefully my hand won't get in the way here. And again, I'm just kind of following that initial sketch, so you want to make sure that before you start this step that you've got that sketch pretty well the way that you want it. And if you wobble a little like I did, no worries. You can certainly just modify it or drink more, and then you won't care if you've wobbled a little bit. And again, my brush is getting a little dry, so I reload as often as I have to. And now I'm just going to start adding these, the thicknesses to the levels. So I do want this one to have a little bit more thickness to it. And again, I'm not going to be adding as much detail as we see in front of us. That painting would take much longer than what we're doing right now. So I'm just kind of adding some thickness to these levels. And then I'm going to give it the essence of the tower itself. I know that there's a lot of cross marks and hatch marks that happen throughout the tower, so I will be doing those at some point. I'm going to go up top and kind of color in this, maybe make it a little bit wider and make some little details in through here. And again, I'm just going for the essence of it, not trying to make it look exactly like I'm seeing in front of me. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start to add some of those cross hatch marks that I'm seeing going all the way up. So again, I'm just using this same color combination, and this is going to, in essence, kind of fill in the empty spaces throughout here. And I'm just using the little tip to my brush, making a whole bunch of little X's going on in through here, and that's going to fill it in nicely but still keep that sky showing through. And again, you could really go to town and make as much detail on this as you want, but I'm just doing a fun, easy kind of open air painting here where I want to get the essence of it without spending 12 hours on it. I know that there's little lookout points here, so if you can add like a little railing up here, great. Again, that just adds to it. I need to add my my fullness of these legs in through here. So that's going to go down that way, and this is going to go down this way. And then I'm going to continue to maybe add another lookout point in through here, a whole bunch of X's in through here. And again, this is just giving you the essence of the tower. It does not have to be perfect. It's a nice impressionistic kind of painting. I'm going to do more of these X's coming on down in through here. I'm going to go right up over my my little city on this side. The bottom legs are going to be covered by those hedges that I was talking about earlier. So again, you don't have to worry about making those bottom edges perfect, but you do definitely want to make sure that you connect these X's to the sides so they look like they're part of the structure and not like little floating sticks or something. So I'm just connecting those to the edges, making sure I get more up here. And then if you want to add the little railing, and if you want to be able to see it, maybe you make it a little bit darker. I just added a little bit more black to my brush to get this railing on here. And again, my ratio is not, 100% accurate, but this is just something that you can really have fun with. I mean, I'm sitting in front of the Eiffel Tower painting it, so I'm just going to have fun with it. I'm not going to get stressed over the detail. I'm just having a whole lot of fun making this to be what I want it to be. You could add, as much detail as you want. You could add these little highlights over here if you wanted to, but I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to go full on into detail. I actually kind of like it the way that it is. Maybe add a little button up at the top because it looks like there's some kind of little detail up there. I know that there's another super fancy observation deck up at the top too. So you could go to town and make this really, really detail oriented, or you could kind of keep it on the more simpler side like I have. We are going to be using this small brush for the next step. So after you're done getting the tower to look as fancy as you want it to, you can wash and dry that the small pointy brush and just get ready for the next step. All right, so what I'm doing for the next step is I'm going to be putting the tree trunks on these big trees that are lining the right side of my view here. And I know that they have to be really, really tiny down at the far, far end, and they're going to be much larger and taller as they get closer to me. So I'm going to be using brown, yellow, and white and black. So kind of the same colors that I used for the Eiffel Tower, only I'm going to be adding yellow to them, and maybe some burnt sienna too. So you can really just get a natural wood color. I'm going to be starting far down here. I know that I want these to be really small in through here, and then over in my foreground over here I want a big one coming over here. This is going to be the one that's closest to me. I think I actually want it to be pretty darn tall over here. I want this to look like it's nice and close to me, so I want it to be really big, and you'll see in a minute why I'm doing this and how this is going to make a big difference to your painting. It's going to give it great dimension. But what I do is I did the small one and the big one, and now I am doing subsequent trees that are going to be, go subsequently smaller. So what I'm going to do is I'll put maybe my next one here, my next one here, and you can see how they're going shorter right now. And then as I go down into these ones, they're really getting tiny, tiny, and then I've got this last one, maybe one more here. And you could, if you wanted to be even more realistic, you could make them a little bit wider as they get towards you, and that'll make them look even more realistic. Don't worry about the bottoms. We're going to be putting shadows on them in a minute, and that's going to help to hide them as well. But we are going to move on to the next step, and the next step is going to be done with that medium bristle brush that I have you working with, so you can take that out and get ready for the next step. All right, so the next step that I'm going to be doing, I'm using the number 4 bristle brush. I'm going to be doing the triangle hedges that are coming out from the very bottom of the Eiffel Tower, and they're working their way closer to me. I'm going to be using primarily green and black, but you can certainly incorporate, I'll probably use the rust as well, and maybe a little bit of white and yellow. I'm looking at where the shadows are in my landscape here, and the shadows are to the right, which means my sun's over to the left. So I'm going to try and make the left side of these lighter and brighter. So what I do is I'm going to start with green and black on my brush, and I'm just going to get them into place. So I'm going to start with little tiny ones off in my distance, and these are just going to be like these little triangle bushes. So what ends up happening is you almost don't even see the base of them all together, but you'll end up seeing the tops of them. So you can just really make a whole bunch of triangles, and I'm just dotting them on there. I want them to get nice and big as they come towards me, just like they are in the actual landscape. So I want this one to be really nice and big. And if you wanted to, you could certainly, as you get towards these bigger ones, you could be using your larger bristle brush. They're the same brush, only one is bigger than the other. I am using a good amount of paint, so that way it will cover up the paint that's underneath it. I am going to just pull out my big brush for this last one because I want this last one to be pretty big. So I've got green and black on my brush, and I'm going to utilize the bottom of my canvas, and I'm going to actually hide this section of my tree over here, or of my tower. So even if you cover up a lot of the painting that you've already done, so be it. This is going to give you some good dimension to it. And I definitely want to get that left side to be lighter than the right side. So that's where the colors of the rust and yellow are going to really help out a lot. So I'm going to put a little bit of yellow and a little bit of rust on my brush and get some highlights going on the left side of these bushes. And when I put my shadows on later, these highlights are really going to make a whole lot of sense when I go to put the shadows on. So here I go. I'm just kind of highlighting the left side of these, making sure that they're nice and bright, and the right side is nice and dark. So if you have to go back and add a little bit more black to that right hand side, just make sure it's nice and dark, and it really gives some good dimension to it. So I will be using my large brush, the wide bristle brush, for the next step. So after you get these little bushes on, you can wash and dry both of your brushes if you want to, but we're going to be using the 1-inch wide bristle brush, and just get ready for the next step. Okay, so for the next step, I'm going to be doing the tree tops on the trees to the right, and I know that these are going to be way taller than my shrubs, so I'm going to be bringing them up super high. The colors that I'm going to be using, again, are going to be my green, rust, yellow, and brown. I don't think I'm going to use much of the black on this, but I do know that the sun is to my left, so I do have a couple of little spots where there's some darkness involved, but I'm not going to worry terribly about that initially. I just want to kind of get the shapes on there. So I'm going to have green, rust, and yellow on my brush to start, and I really just want to kind of get these into shape. I like doing the biggest one first, because all the other ones will subsequently come in size order to that one. So I'm going to start this one off. These tops are fun because they're like square, which is really neat. I can't imagine what kind of ladder they need to go and trim those, but they're super fun. If you want them to look a little bit more natural, you don't need to make the edges of it look so clean. You want it to look a little bit messier. So that's why I'm really just kind of dotting and having some fun with this. I am going to incorporate some brown. I'm seeing that I do want it to be a little bit darker over on that right hand side. So just getting this a little bit messier, and then I want to kind of decide where I want these other ones. So I'm really, at this point, going to do almost like this outline thing, just so I can not get lost in my painting. I have a habit of getting lost and not remembering where I was, or losing kind of my bearings. These back ones almost don't matter because they're so little, and as I'm looking at them, you almost can't see the distinct edges to them. So if you don't get it, the fine detail on those back ones, don't worry about it, because you can certainly improvise here. I'm going to be using a little bit of brown in through here just to make sure I have a shadow kind of leading between them if I can. And then I'm going to be utilizing that green, yellow, and maybe a little bit of white on those edges. And the only way that you're going to get these to look like they're different from one another is to add high contrast next to it. So you can see I'm dotting in a whole bunch of yellow at the edge of this one so it looks different from that one. And you can, have fun with these colors. They don't have to be exactly as you're seeing in the landscape. Sometimes when you improv and you use the colors that you like, sometimes that makes that painting more special to you and more, personal to you. So just make sure that this turns out to be something that you enjoy and not something that stressed you out throughout the process. So right now I'm really adding some bright highlights over on these edges, and I'm just I want it to look, have some natural feel to it, so I'm just kind of adding these little pops of leaves coming out. I've got it staying nice and dark in between. I'm going to do some nice bright faces on these couple of ones and through here. So I'm adding yellow and white to my brush. And then I will be utilizing the medium brush for the next step. So once you've got this nice and filled in and you're digging what's happening with these trees, make sure you bring them down low enough. I'm looking and actually I'm feeling like I haven't brought them down low enough, so I'm gonna bring a couple of these down just a little bit farther, so that way I don't have too much of a gap in through there. And then once you've got these as far down as you want, we're going to switch brushes to the medium bristle brush, so you can put the big one away in your water cup and take out that medium bristle brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what I'm doing for the next step is I'm using my medium bristle brush, my number 4, and what I'm going to be doing is adding shadows. So my shadows, my sun is off to the left, and I want all my shadows to go off to the right. They're really long shadows right now because the sun is pretty low, and they're kind of at a little bit of a diagonal. So that's what I'm going to attempt to add here. The trick with doing these type of shadows on this kind of fast painting is you don't want to have a lot of paint on your brush, and I use these bristle brushes so that way I can almost scrub it onto the canvas. So it doesn't really matter where you start, but I want to do a shadow along my grassy area. So I just put a little bit of black onto my brush. I actually just wiped it on my paper towel because I don't want a lot of it. And what I'm doing is I'm just kind of scrubbing it right into that corner, and then I'm just going to kind of pull it out just a little bit. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I've got a little bit of black. You don't really want to use white. And just pop this up just a smudge here. So I've got a little bit of black on my brush, and I'm just really scrubbing it along the edge of my grassy area. And then I want to add the shadows from these bushes. So I've got black on my brush, and I see that this is a little bit of a hill. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that real dark black underneath it, and then as I come here, I'm going to go down, make it look like it's going down the hill, and then it's coming down at an angle out here. But I need it to have a little bit of volume because I know that this is a wider tree. So I put it a little bit wider as it's coming out from that, from the base of the tree. And I'm going to do the same thing for the other ones. Let me just Get a little bit of black in through here. I come down this little hill, and then I'm going to come down at an angle. And you have to keep them like in size ratio, otherwise it won't look as natural. And it's got to be a little bit wider here. And then I'm going to do the same thing for these other ones. And I know that they're going to be smaller. And then when I go to do the ones on these trees, I'm going to incorporate a little bit more brown into it because the ground is a little bit lighter. I'll just kind of add a little bit here. So I want them to kind of come at the same angle as those ones. And they're going to disappear behind. I did that in front, so I'm putting that tree back in front of it. So I just need them to go in that direction. I like to kind of disguise the bottoms of the tree, so that's why you see me rubbing it in here. I know that I want that to, but I do need a shadow going in that direction. And what I'll also do while I'm here, and I've got this this bristle brush, which is fantastic for adding any kind of depth to this. I'm going to pick up a little bit of white paint here too, and just make sure that I've got, some texture going along this ground. You can put some texture at the bottom of these trees, and that way it will make sure that it looks nice and full if you need to add anything in through here. So this is just kind of adding a little bit more dimension to it. Let me just get a little bit more white on my brush here. The ground is nice and gray and brown, and it's got some yellows in it. So right now I'm just adding more texture to the ground, so it makes it look a little bit more natural here. And I'm also going to add a little bit of highlight to the fronts of these trees with this same brush, and I'm doing it in the same loose kind of fashion. So just white and maybe a little yellow on the brush. Again, this is just this small brush, which helps to, this small bristle brush, which allows you to really move this paint around until it dries. And then we're going to do one more step, I think, maybe two, but one more step with that small pointy brush. So after you get these little highlights on your trees and you've got your shadows on the ground, you can put this medium brush away in your water cup, and you can take out your small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so I'm going to be using my number 6 brush for this step. I'm in essence going to be filling in any vacant gaps that I feel are here. Like, I feel like this is really vacant in here. I could have put the back trees, like a big full line in there, but I liked the lightness that this was presenting, so I kept that. But I will be putting some things. I want to fill in the bottom here. I want to kind of disguise the bottom foot of the tower there. So I'm going to be using this small brush. This is going to be some dark areas. It's kind of an interpretive, impressionistic, fill it in with kind of whatever you want. But I'm going to be using some dark accents for this. So right now I'm using a little bit of rust and a little bit of black to just kind of, start adding some information back here. You might find that you just want to put some bushes back there. So I just added a little bit of green, maybe some, yellow. So maybe this just becomes a line of bushes, or, maybe you want to add some buildings onto it. Adding buildings is a more detailed kind of step, but if you feel like you want to go ahead and do that, feel free to do so. You can see I lose myself sometimes, and I was just adding some highlights onto those bushes. But now I want to do something here too, close off this spot, so I'm adding some dark colors to my brush here. This might just fade off into the distance and just be little interpretive marks that don't really mean anything other than filling in the gap and having that eye not think of it as a vacant space. Like this too, I know that this was meant to be some green. It looks like there's some trees or something up here, so I'm just dotting this a little bit more because I wasn't fully content with that. And then same thing over here. I feel like it's vacant, so I'm going to just kind of start filling it in with a little bit darker colors, maybe wiggle my brush a little bit, see what happens, see what I end up liking. I could add some more green into here. I don't want, for me, I don't want to take away from these trees in through here. So I really just want this to almost be an accent back here, even if it just becomes a dull color that is enhancing the painting, or making it so there's not a vacancy back there. A lot of times when you're looking at landscapes, the objects in the distance will get darker will get softer and more muted. So I feel like that's kind of what I want to go for right now back here, and then that way your eye is not being drawn into that vacancy back here. It will just almost be disguised by it. So that kind of, the sun is making my eyes water too. So that helps me visually, and then what I'll do is, if I bumped into my trees, like I feel I bumped into them a little bit, I can just come back and re-identify the edges of those trees, and then that way your eye is no longer being drawn into that vacant area behind the trees. And I could have gone really dark, because that's what it is in all actuality, but again, I really liked the lightness, so that was kind of created on my canvas, so I just went with it, which is, your creative license. You get to really interpret it whatever way you want to and make it into something really as special as you want it to be. Right now I'm adding a little yellow onto these tree trunks because I want them to be lighter and brighter, and I want them to really be pulled from this side over here. So this is in essence kind of your final step of just tweaking this and making these little modifications that make you as the painter happy with it. Another little tweak I'm going to do, I just switched my brushes. I'm not digging my shadows in through here, so I'm just going to add a little bit of white and brown to disguise these a little bit. And a little bit more white here. And then when I'm doing this, if I feel like I've made it too different from this side, I can just bring some of these colors back over behind here if I wanted to. So again, this is your creative license that you're utilizing. And I'm getting pretty happy with this at this point. I think I'm missing a shadow on this one here. This is just my tweaking stage, so you can tweak as much as you need to. This is a really fun, personalized stage here. But there is one final step to any good painting, and that's going to be done with your tiny brush. So when you do get done tweaking this as much as you want it to be tweaked, we're going to switch brushes to that small, tiny brush, your one that we used to do the Eiffel Tower. But let me just I wanted to highlight on this little hill here. All right. And this just makes all the sunshine. It makes our shadows make sense. All right. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to put any brushes that you have, you can either hold out, but I'm going to be using that small brush for the final step. So when you're ready, you get that out and get ready to finish this up. Okay, so for the final step, what I'm going to do is sign it, because that's what I do on every painting. I'm going to sign it in the bottom left, bottom right, or the bottom right. You can sign it wherever you want to. I'm going to be using, I think I'm going to use black and brown to sign it. I use my initials. You could certainly use your first name. You could use the date. You could use your whole name. Whatever is your identifying mark is your identifying mark, so feel free to make it your own. And that is going to conclude this painting. I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you love your painting, and I look forward to painting with you again sometime.
Thanks for watching. Please join me as I paint and sip around the world.